Kevin? Okay, Damian's here. He's got his stein full of hopefully something healthy.
Yogurt.
Awesome. So, Damian and I are going to present on AngularJS. Raise your hand if you've heard of AngularJS. Wow, that's awesome. Come on, Jeremiah, don't sit on me. Okay, so that's good. So, what is AngularJS? Let me just preface this with there aren't going to be a ton of slides. We're going to spend a lot of our time showing you guys actual code because that's more fun than just talking about AngularJS. So what is it? It is a JavaScript framework for building single-page applications. So if you want to have a really smooth application like Jeremiah showed, his single-page app wasn't in Angular, but you could write something like that in Angular. It is built by Google. Raise your hand if you've heard of Google. Oh, Kevin has. That's good. It is a number. Thank you. So because it was built by Google, I think we can all agree that it's going to be a pretty solid code foundation. It's very well maintained. Its documentation is okay. It's open source and development is very active. So it's been in development for, I don't know, a year or two, maybe a little longer. They're on version, I think, 1.3 at this point. It's a very solid code base, lots and lots of contributors. So it's a really active project, which is makes it a really solid foundation to build applications on. It is also the 6th most starred GitHub repository, so it's pretty big. I think the number of stars it has is 23,000 or so. Ahead of it are things like, I think jQuery is up there, other projects that I can't remember off the top of my head, but it is very, very popular. So for some of its features, Damian, would you like to talk about some of its features?
Sure. I don't have the slide deck running, so...
That's okay. I'll just keep going here until we get to the code samples.
So Angular has a lot of stuff, I guess, built in that we typically spend a lot of time scaffolding in typical jQuery fashion or other layout-like stuff. It's an MVW for whatever architecture. Yeah. I have no jokes for that. It doesn't impose upon you anything that you necessarily don't want to do with however you want to present it, whether it be MVC, MVV, WPCW, whatever. It's open in that you can kind of choose your own adventure. Next. I think pretty much the big strength of it is a few things, but one is two-way data binding, and it's kind of hard to show without just the power of the code, which we should get into eventually. And it's extending HTML with directives. Directives is a concept where you basically get to tell HTML, fill in the gaps of what it doesn't do currently. You can make it do it. And you can do it in a reusable fashion. So that's one of the things that I think is going to be very promising for us, is that we can truly port things around from whatever separate CMS architectures that we have. We have truly reusable front-end components.
So in terms of integrating with our own projects here, because it's very front-end heavy, you might be curious as to how we're going to involve all the teams. So one of the best ways to do so would be to use the .NET and PHP developer skills to build web services. Dave and I have a lot of fun, and where's Eddie? Eddie's in here somewhere. We're having a lot of fun right now with an NEB project doing so. So they're building a web service for us, and I call the service, and they return back the data that I need, and I display that data up on the screen. So like I was saying, so I hook into those services with HTTP requests. So the service that they've built will take an object that I pass through a post, and they will process that, that object and return back to me what I'm expecting, and then I will use Angular to build out the markup, and ta-da, you have a data-driven single-page application. So it's pretty simple to build. There are a few gotchas, though. I think this is yours.
Yeah, I think I updated the slide maybe 30 minutes ago and don't have them, but
it should. Did you commit it?
I did.
Then it'll be there.
Maybe I didn't do it correctly. All right. So it's basically down with the dollar sign. One of the things that I have seen in working with Angular so far is, especially if you get into looking at stuff on Stack Overflow and community answers, Angular is its own framework. It's written in JavaScript, yes, it's a front-end thing, but it needs to be separated from the concept of jQuery, the things that we use jQuery for. 19 times out of 20, you can probably do it the Angular way, which doesn't involve jQuery. So when starting out, if you're learning or starting a new project, I would encourage just not including jQuery at all until perhaps much later if you actually do need it. But
yeah, and I think it's important to point out that Angular ships with a version of jQuery that's a light version. It allows you to, diet or light or something like that. And it allows you to do a lot of actions that you would have done before with jQuery. And so you can do that in the jQuery way, essentially. But it's a very, very lightweight version that doesn't have nearly all the functionality that you get with the actual version of jQuery.
But you probably don't need anyway.
Yep.
I think we have this covered.
Yeah, we kind of already just talked about this. So, so when you're building applications, a lot of the tips that I've seen on Stack Overflow as I've been working through things is definitely just try to think of how to do it the Angular way. The concept of directives is something that they developed for Angular, and that is very much in the Angular way to do things. And so you'll find there are lots and lots of discussions around, if I'm trying to do something really that would have been really simple and I'm used to doing it in jQuery, well, how do I do it with Angular? And so that's one of the important things to keep track of. So, and that wasn't a ton of information, but I think it kind of gives you guys an idea of what AngularJS is. It's just a JavaScript framework. It allows us to build single-page applications. So we have a few examples that we can show you that will make this a little more interesting, hopefully. Huh? Well, what? Oh, is it fitting on the screen right? Okay. So the first example I was going to show is the Fed Template Engine documentation, which some of you guys might have seen. So this is a site that I built with Angular. Let me first preface it with, it's actually built from a library called SAS Doc. And what SAS Doc does is it outputs a JSON file. So if we can, so it's looking for SAS Doc JSON. Let's see if that, yeah. Let's get rid of that. So this is a JSON file that's automatically output. SAS Doc will go through all of your SAS code and read the different comments that you put, and it'll create this documentation for you. The automatic documentation it builds is okay. It was really only made to document functions and mix-ins, but with some cleverness in how you categorize things and use keywords, you can make it document whatever you want, basically. So when you have some things like base defaults, this looks like it's not going to document anything in the default SAS doc build. However, there is some information in there. So I took this JSON file as my basis in Angular. And so if you go into base, you see there is actually some information here for defaults. All of that is being pulled in with Angular. So if I look at the page source here, thank you. You're welcome. So I'm loading up Angular, and then I have an app, and literally all I'm doing with my app is loading the JSON file. This is a really, really simple example. So I'm pulling in my SAS doc JSON file, and I'm creating a variable on my scope. The scope is essentially exactly what you would think it is. It is your scope at that point in terms of your variable scope. And for this scope, it is relative to my controller. And I'll show you in the markup in a second where that controller is sitting. So if I go back here, I can see, let's see, my Angular app is defined up here, and then I have a controller. Let's just look for it. It'll be easier to find. There it is. So I have a controller that's defined here. So essentially this div is what wraps my scope. So everything that I'm referencing in here, I can reference back to the scope of that single controller. So you can define multiple controllers, and each controller will have its own scope. So in here, I have some static content and some just plain paragraphs and such. Then you'll start seeing things like, is that big enough, Peter? Can you read that? Okay. So you'll see some things like ng repeat. ng repeat is a directive that allows you to loop through objects. And in this case, I am looping through my variable that I called objects. So right here. And in each, inside of objects, there is another object called variables. So if I look at my JSON file, let's see, collapse all this stuff down. So here we go. So variables is a JSON object within my objects variable. So within there, I can iterate through, and it'll just automatically cycle through that list of objects, and I'm going to say that each one is going to be called a variable type. And then within there, you can use the double bracket syntax to reference properties, and there will be arrays, and so the structure is pretty simple to cycle through. So in the case of each variable, in our SAS documentation, we have a breakpoints file for like a single variable file that defines all of our breakpoints. So for each of my parameters, and so this is a case where SAS doc, like I said, is it's a way to document functions and mixins. So functions and mixins have parameters. For this, I'm just saying these are the variables that are my breakpoints. So I have an actual breakpoints variable. It is a list, and then I have a description that says this is what this parameter does. And so within there, I can reference the name, the type, and the description, and its output in the markup. So that's a pretty simple example. We want to get to more interesting stuff that Damian's worked on, but that's one example of just how to pull some data, output it with Angular. Do you want to do the data monitor one next, or? Sure.
Are we doing the HDMI thing?
Yeah. Okay. Or do you want to just use my computer?
No.
Okay.
Get the code on here.
Okay. Let me make you presenter.
Yes.
Did I get disconnected? Oh. You guys got it?
Are we up and running?
Good. This is a little more exciting.
All right. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on this page.
On your computer. You can do it in.
Okay. So this.
You can just mute yourself over
In the, yeah. Expand the full panel. Hit telephone. There, that'll work.
I'm giving a presentation.
Yeah, watch it with the arrow. There you go.
Mic check. Yay. Okay, so here we have a page. If we check out the source on this, basically we have this little bit of info here. Weather clock is a funky HTML element that doesn't really exist. Yet here we go. We have it up on top, and that's the concept of directives in Angular, is we can create our own HTML, basically, and fill in the stuff that we wish it would do or it doesn't do. We can totally make that happen. So as Alex was saying earlier, we set up our application. In this case, it's a little bit different than what he showed. And we're loading everything asynchronously, and then we kind of define what makes our application by registering different modules. Here I have we have our weather clock, and it comes in here. So weather clock. This is works basically through dependency injection, which is kind of a strange concept for JavaScript so far, but it's pretty cool, meaning that we can say this module depends on this module, as in right here within weather clock, we can state that this directive depends on this directive right here, and if we don't have this, it's not going to run. So that's helpful for us in development. And the different architectural approaches, I guess this wouldn't be an architectural thing, but there are many ways to do what we want to do. Basically, we can define elements completely, and this is awesome, except for that it's not really going to play well in IE. So if we're interested in supporting that type of thing, we can also make a weather clock attribute, and that will also still work for us. Alex showed that we are able to get data from whatever JSON endpoint that we need. That's awesome for us, and that's I got nothing. So basically, we're able to take data and render it really easily. How are we doing on time? 13 minutes, right? Okay.
18 minutes.
All right. I think this will probably be a better path. We have this data here from staff list, which I got from a JSON point and was able to just, spit everything out on this page, wicked super easy. And by simply going through a repeater that Alex kind of started going into. So within our markup, we're able to say that we're going to output this in a table, and then the data that we're going to repeat is through a table row here. So we feed it our model, which in this case is going to be staff list. Which we get from here. So if we follow this chain up, it just goes to the staff list query, which we get from this endpoint. And it doesn't matter where, we get the data and we're able to loop through it just by dropping it in here. So this is the way that we get the data back, and is as easy as just dropping in this ng repeat, specifying our properties here. The filter that we see up top is, this is a good example of the two-way data binding. The search text we have right here comes from this input, which we specify our ng model is search text. So when we go to the page, we just define this as part of our model here. So we can type in something, and if it were hooked up by pressing save, and that's our two-way data binding. So we don't have to do anything with hooking into a blur or whatever JavaScript that we have to monitor and then say update or whatever we're trying to update. It's just done. So when I first output this list, I realized that this is just a dumb list. I wonder what it would take for me to add this filtering on. And I ended up with the whole endpoint in probably less than 10 minutes, which I would say would take significantly longer in anything else. So we now have a list that we can search through, and we have these headers here that we might want to sort on this type of field. So I know this isn't semantic and it's not appropriate to use this anchor here. Petra's not listening. It's fine. So that was basically my escape clause for you. In the in my control over here, I have the scope object, and we give it a predicate. It could be anything. You can name it taco, taco being first name. This is our header, and that's the field that we're going to choose from. So the first name, you see, actually matches up to the property that gets output. So if we give it the, let's pretend I know what I'm doing here. So order by in the repeat clause, we just give it an order by, and we're able to break. Yay, live coding. There we go. So as simple as that, we're able to hook in everything with ordering, I suppose.
When you did it work there, you had lowercase b that spit some stuff onto the console?
Yeah, it'll straight throw an error for you.
Sometimes the errors aren't exactly clear, but kind of get used to them.
But the errors are also frequently on because of
Yeah.
Yes.
It has this link which opens up this, hey dummy, what are you talking about? This is super helpful, and to that note, Angular comes, there's a project called Seed, which is started by the Angular guys. It's kind of basically their version of Debut, I guess, and it comes with a structure that they kind of suggest you search projects on, and it includes testing. So one of the strengths of Angular is that it actually really heavily lends itself to unit testing and other stuff. So I don't have anything running right now, but it works off of Protractor or Jasmine and Karma. So those are some front-end testing things that it's cool that you can have a little console window running down in the bottom, and as you're coding, it monitors your file system, and it'll see if you've saved a change and automatically kick off all the tests. So by my not capitalizing that, I could have had a test that would make sure the page actually spit something out, and that would have failed and would have given me immediate feedback upon hitting save. I don't think we'd get too much into that because there's really a whole lot to cover in 40 minutes here. Since we have 10 minutes left, do you guys have any questions, basically? Or I could ramble on nervously for 10 more minutes, too.
Looks like Cam's got one.
Yeah, you're routing
Yes. So this guy up at top, basically consider this as wrapped in a master page. We can see that my URL has changed everything. This didn't change. So if we go back and forth, we can see that it's up. Routing is pretty easy to configure so far. This seems to work for smaller, non-dynamic sites so far. So something that we would get into. Ben Nadel has a good example of like a puppy abduction site where you want to go and check out dogs for adoption, and there are 50 dogs. You don't want to define 50 different routes. But for the base example brochure site, this is the Angular default convention. It's kind of an out-of-the-box thing, and it does lend itself to the more dynamic stuff that we tend to focus on. But it definitely has a few weaknesses in this area that they do try to address by other projects like Angular UI, please.
I think if memory serves too, I mean, this is more powerful than it looks. I think you can send in a specific controller and things like that as well.
Yeah.
You know, it isn't just directing to different templates. So there's a little bit more that you can do here than is demonstrated here. But I remember his example, and it gets pretty complex with letting you insert different views without actually, I forget exactly, but it was pretty cool when I was looking at that dog example. Anyone likes dogs, check it out.
Dogs.
What's the guy's name?
Ben Nadel. He's a Cold Fusion developer, and they are hiring, if anybody.
Please go.
I think, well, I was going to say, didn't Dan Whalen, when we were Angular-based, wasn't Breeze his solution to routing in Angular that he used? What was? Oh, I thought he had a routing situation that he had, and I can't remember what it was, but.
I think that was Breeze. I think he was doing I think he could pop up with routing and stuff.
Okay, yeah, sorry. There's solutions for routing. I was just trying to.
Those are all, I think, other questions.
Just earlier you mentioned it ships with a very light jQuery, but not to use jQuery. And this is some of my Fed ignorance I'd like to throw in there. The first thing when I continuously look at your code is I see $signs, I think of jQuery. Is there no conflict initiated somewhere in here where I'm assuming the $sign is all the way Angular actually handles its variables and things. So if I have jQuery in there, I'm assuming I specifically have to call it to use it or something, like jQuery dot.
So I assume, wait, can you go back to your JavaScript? I assume you're talking about like how we have like $ scope.
Correct.
So the $sign as a prefix is just an Angular convention. It's not actually referencing anything. So in this case, it's just a way to say, hey, it's essentially like what we actually do sometimes with jQuery, where we'll have a variable and we'll just prefix the variable with the $sign. So like $ body would be maybe a way for us to cache the body element and just give it a really clear variable name that says, hey, this is a jQuery object. In this case, it's a very similar concept. It's not actually a referencing jQuery or anything. It's just a way to say, hey, this is an Angular variable, basically. So like, same with like resource and how it's a function.
So what I found were there were some things where, say modals, for instance, pop-ups, maybe different kinds of overlays, and different dynamic effects that don't necessarily come out of the box that need some JavaScript and some DOM manipulation in order to make them happen. And I basically write a JavaScript plugin or a jQuery plugin that was a directive. What have been your approaches to taking care of stuff like that that's not the jQuery way of doing it?
I haven't dealt with that yet, but that's how I would probably do it. Because anytime I've read anything about DOM manipulation, they always say you should be doing so in a directive. And yeah, so that's pretty much, I think, the way that I would handle it is create a modal directive in that particular case. And then in terms of animations, I would probably use CSS animations for the most part. If you look at Angular has a lot of built-in animation capabilities, and they always use CSS animations and transitions. So like when you have, let's say you have a list like on staff list, and as you're filtering, you want, instead of just being a static jump, the animation is done with CSS, and you have like an enter, leave, and I think one other property that it animates with. So yeah, directives plus CSS. So yeah.
Yeah, this is just a list that we're running through ng repeat, and the new items that are dropping in, those get a class on them that you can animate, and it lends itself to being awesome in that fashion. The thing with the DOM manipulation is anywhere that you're calling Damian, you need to manipulate, or you're actually calling an element. That's a pretty good